Hey everybody, it's Courtney Bowden here. Welcome to the Think Like a Thought Leader Show, where Black entrepreneurs and leaders like you come to learn how to increase their impact, influence, and revenue related to the work that you do in the world. Now, if you're a young person or are the parent of a young person, or you just know a young person, I'm talking late teens to early 20s, then you definitely want to tune in because I'm here with the incredible Raven Magwood. Hey Raven, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Now, Raven is a published author, a motivational speaker, and a filmmaker. And she became a national gymnastics champion when she was just 11 years old. So, today we're discussing how our young people can understand what pivoting into purpose truly can look like, because Raven is a shining example of having done just that. But before we dive into all of that, I want to take this time to say this quickly. I know a lot of our young adults are trying to find meaning right now in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of the craziness that has been caused as a result of this pandemic. And, I get the sense that they're aware that everything that we all perceive as normal has shifted in a more permanent way. And so I have so many of my friends who have been sharing their thoughts with me about everything. And much of the consensus is not many of us think that many things will return to normal ever again. That's a little scary for some, and rightfully so, right, Raven?
Right, right. And I agree with you.
So I think the prevailing question is what happens next? I think a lot of people have been giving some thought to that. So before we even attempt to answer that question, Raven, can you take a moment to tell those who aren't familiar with you about your mission and the work that you do?
Yes, I'm an author and I'm a motivational speaker. And my mission really is to utilize my books, my movies, my speeches, anything that I create to inspire people to become the best versions of themselves. That's what I'm about to my core, definitely my mission. And I just want people to walk away better people due to something that I've written or created. And so, whether I am giving a speech to kindergartners or CEOs, or I'm writing my next book, I just want people to feel enlightened and empowered to be the best people they can be.
That's incredible. Now, I'm sure that there are plenty of parents watching, or maybe even young people who are being forced to really pivot and shift their plans. I think everybody, right?
Right.
It's not fair to just say young people. But I really have a special place in my heart for the graduating seniors, for instance, who won't get the chance to
Right.
experience a traditional commencement ceremony, or the incoming freshmen who are planning to go to college for the first time, who aren't sure about whether they'll get the college experience that they've been preparing themselves for. So, Raven, can you talk about what you have been seeing and hearing, what you've been thinking about, and talk about how you've been able to really pivot from being a high level athlete to being an author, a filmmaker, and a motivational speaker. So something had to happen where you were like, okay, it's time for me to pivot. And I think that's a really good time for us to talk about it right now because of what we're being forced to think about.
Right. This time is just, of course, it's different. And it's forcing us to tap into skills that we may have even not even thought that we had before. We're forced to think about things in a different way. We're forced to carry on our lives in a different way. And for me, it has been different and oftentimes challenging in a certain aspect because I am used to going out and speaking to big groups, speaking to schools, speaking to universities, speaking to huge business groups. And so to have been in my house for over a month now and not be able to get out and about and talk to people, I have been doing more of this where I'm impacting people through a camera on my computer. And so it's different. But what I've come to realize is that there's so many opportunities to impact people. There's so many opportunities for me to tap into that before I wasn't tapping into, whether it was because I didn't feel like I had the time or I just wasn't forced to be in this situation where I was home and had to look into different opportunities to use social media and to use different aspects to inspire people. And so I think the big thing is to look at where you are, the tools that you have, and how you can utilize those tools to your advantage. That is huge. And that's for whatever industry that you may be in. I think that life is going to change at any given point in time. And so there's always going to be changes, maybe not as drastic as this one has been over this past couple of months, but there's always going to be changes in life. And how can you adapt to those changes to your advantage, whether it's personally, professionally, spiritually, whatever it may be? And so for me, yes, I did go from being a national gymnastics champion to a motivational speaker and an entrepreneur. And a lot of the tools that I utilized as a gymnast, that hard work, that dedication, the competition aspect, I use now in my career as an author, as an entrepreneur, as a filmmaker. And so those things translated, they just translated in a different way.
I love the fact that you talk about those transferable skills, because I think we all have them. And if, given the time and the space to really think about it, we could probably sense a thread based off of everything that we've probably done throughout our entire lives. So you're definitely an accomplished person, and I certainly honor that in you. I think a lot of people mistakenly believe that it takes everyone a long time to find their purpose. And I don't necessarily think that's true. So how did you identify your purpose at such a young age? Because I'm hearing a lot of talk about that, just, taking this time to find your purpose and find your calling.
Yes.
And there might be people who are watching that say, well, I have the time, but I really am not super clear on my purpose.
I think in order to find your purpose, you have to look at what makes you angry, what makes you sad, what makes you happy, what makes you emotional. And when you can tap into those emotions, you can find what it is that you're passionate about, and therefore find what your purpose is. Because when you can find that intersection between what you're passionate about and then how you can fulfill a need in the world, then that's where your purpose comes in alignment and what you should be doing each and every day. I know for me, I've always enjoyed, ever since I gave my first speech at 12 years old, I've enjoyed speaking and inspiring people and giving people tools to become the best versions of themselves that they can be. But all my life, I had been called the smart girl. And because of that, people would tell me you should be a doctor. And I just heard this all my life, whether it was from distant family members, whether it was just people in the community, friends, teachers. It was, Raven, you should be a doctor, be a doctor, be a doctor. And I internalized that for a very long time. And in fact, when I went to college, I went in as a major that was in medicine, because I said, I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to be a doctor, and that's just what I'm going to do. And then I remember my mom actually pulling me aside one day and asking me why I wanted to be a doctor. And I couldn't really answer it straight. I was saying, well, they help people, they make a good living. I was given all these reasons. And she was like, Ray, that's not the answer. And then she reformulated her question and she said, what would you do if someone would pay you any amount of money to do it? And I said, well, I would speak and I would write and I would help people. I would do what I'm doing now, just in a bigger way, on a bigger scale. And she looked at me and she said, then that's what you need to do. That's what you need to tap into. And literally the next week I went in, changed my major. I took like 22 hours a semester for my last year just so I could get out of there at the same time. But it's then that I realized we have to look at, what would we do for free? What do we do for free? What do we have fun doing? What do we do that impacts other people's lives? And like I said, what's that intersection between the passion and then where we can fulfill a need? And that's where you start to find your purpose. But you just have to be honest with yourself about those emotions. I think if children is what makes you tick, with children, you get sad and you get emotional and you want to help them. How can you get into a career that does help kids? Maybe it's with pets, maybe it's with writing, maybe it's with electronics. It could be so many things, but you have to tap into that. And then how can you find a way to fulfill a need?
That's really sound advice. And I think that I will also add to that by saying you have to give yourself space and time to do that.
Right.
I think a lot of times we underestimate the process. Again, not saying that it has to take forever.
Mhm.
But in order to become really skilled at something, you do have to invest time. You do
Exactly.
have to invest your attention. And so I think that there's something to be said about sticking to something long
Yes.
enough so that you can see the fruits of it. So how are you able to identify the difference between something that's just for fun or just for a season versus something that you said, I think I'm really going to stick to this and, really stick it out?
Once again, I think when you find that intersection, something could be a hobby that you do just for fun and you do on the side. But if you can find a way to fulfill a need, now you're tapping into an entrepreneurship space. Now you're tapping into a worker space, whether you're an employee or an employer, you're tapping into a space where now you're able to get paid for your passion. And in that case, it's definitely something to stick with, because what do they say? If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. You want to try to get into something that you are passionate about and that you love. And when it comes to things of that nature, just as you said, it's about the follow through, and it's about being intentional about the things that you have to do every day in order to become successful at whatever it is that you're doing. A lot of times we can be mistaken for what's supposed to be a season and what's supposed to be a lifetime, sometimes because it takes a little bit of work, and maybe we're not willing to put forth that effort or that work, or maybe we just underestimated the amount of work that it's going to take to be successful at whatever it is that we started. And so we want to make sure every day that we're intentional about it, because it's not always going to be easy. Some days you aren't going to want to work. Some days you won't feel that passion. But if you want to keep moving forward, you have to just keep that intention about staying in that space and doing the necessary things in order to reach a certain level of prosperity.
Speaking of prosperity, your latest book is called The Seven Practices of Prosperous Women, a
Yes.
spiritual woman's guide to success. Can you talk about that book, and can you talk about what being prosperous means for you?
Yes. I really, really, really enjoy writing this book. And I got the idea just from traveling the country, traveling the world, really, speaking to women about their everyday lives and how they're able to balance so many different hats. Because as women, we wear a lot of different hats, whether it's wife, mother, entrepreneur, youth leader, whether we're involved in our church, whether we're involved at our kids' schools, whatever it may be, we wear a lot of hats. And it's about, how can I balance this? How can I achieve prosperity with everything going on? So I formulated these 7 practices, which start with visualize the end result and go all the way to never throwing in the towel. And with these 7 practices, I basically look at these as ingredients to your prosperity. And when I talk about prosperity, sometimes people say, well, does that just have to do with money? And it doesn't. I don't think prosperity necessarily has to do with money at all. It's a mindset. Are you doing the most with what you have where you are? What's your potential? What are you capable of doing? And then are you tapping into that fully? When you tap into that fully, that's when you're prosperous. And when you tap into that fully, yes, the money comes, the happiness comes, the joy comes, the success comes. And so, yes, prosperity, let's forget the coins for a second. It's not about just in the bag. It's about doing the most with what you have where you are. And it takes intention to be able to do that every day.
I completely agree with that. And I think now more than perhaps ever before in our lifetimes, we're seeing what other forms of prosperity really looks like. For instance, I think all of us may be familiar with the phrase "health is wealth." But
Mhm.
now we're
Yeah,
seeing, just
exactly.
how important being prosperous in health is. And so I agree with you. What are some other areas that people can be prosperous in? So we're not just talking about securing the
Mhm.
bag. I think that people might be a little bit fatigued with that. Now, I'm not saying that securing the bag is a bad thing. Go
Right.
ahead, get your coin. But I think that there are so many other things that make up that journey that are often missed. What
Exactly.
else, in your view, Raven?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more. You can look at your personal life, the relationships you have with the people who are around you. Are you putting forth the effort that's necessary in each of these relationships to make sure that people in your life know you're there for them, that you are maintaining the relationships in a positive way. That's extremely important to me. And so even in my success journal, I'll lay out 4 different categories, and one of them is personal. What are you doing every day that your future self will thank you for in your personal life? So you have personal, you have professional. And once again, yes, professional has to do with your career, but it's not just about the money. It's about the networking aspect and just your career as a whole, what you're doing each and every day. Once again, that your professional self will thank you for. Then you have spiritual. What are you doing in that aspect to prosper in that aspect and feel good with your spiritual life? You have your physical self, which we kind of touched on. Health is wealth. And are you doing what's necessary for your body? Your body's your temple. Are you doing the things so that you can be here as long as you want to be here, God willing? So you want to just tap into all of these different aspects of your life and do the best with what you have where you are. It's not just about money, money, money. It's about these 4 categories coming together, which make a whole person. They make an entire individual, a whole life.
That's great. So, Raven, what's the one thing that you do every single day that you've come to understand your future self thanks you for? Like, how do you invest in yourself every single day so that you look up and 6 months from now, a year from now, 5, even 10 years from now, you can say, I'm so glad I started that practice, or I'm
Yeah.
so glad I kept up. I'm so glad that I stayed consistent. What is that thing for you?
I go back to the word intention. I think being intentional is why I have been able to achieve a certain amount of success. And that's something that I repeat to myself throughout the day, every day. I don't just let life happen to me. And I think a lot of people do. We wake up, especially now, a lot of us are not working or we're working from home, and we can just kind of let life happen to us. And we wake up and just kind of see where the day goes. And we just kind of find time to do the things that we may need to do. But it's not about finding the time. It's about making the time for your priorities and the things you need to do. And so every single night before I go to sleep, I make a to-do list. And with this to-do list, I look at those 4 different categories in my life: the spiritual, personal, professional, physical. And I do something during the next day that my future self will thank me for. But when I wake up the next day, I get started on that to-do list. I'm intentional about making sure that I do the necessary things to achieve success. And that oftentimes may require, okay, Raven, put your phone up for an hour. Just put it up so you can't scroll through Instagram, so you can't get distracted. Put it over on the other side of your room, and then do as much as you can in the next 45 minutes. Do as much as you can in the next hour. Then you can take a break. But when you really give all your effort to a task and you're intentional like that, you notice that you can get so much more done. At least I do. I know I get so much more done than just having my phone scrolling through something that's taking me 5 hours. I probably could have done in an hour if I was just very intentional about what I was doing. And so that's definitely something that's extremely important. And it just allows me to do things that maybe the average person, it would take 6 months, a year, 2 years. I can get done really in a few weeks because I'm just so focused in on what it is that I say I want.
That's really good. And I find that to work for me as well. We live in a time where we are so distracted. I mean, this is a whole like
Right.
world in itself, right? And even I have to pull myself away, as someone who likes to keep myself the pulse, my finger on the pulse of what's going on. And even as a marketing and communication strategist, I feel like sometimes I'm like, and then I just have to recognize, okay, let me just sit down and focus. And honestly, I read somewhere there's a study that actually debunks the myth that you can multitask. There's really no such thing as multitasking,
I agree.
because our attention is always going to be split by the number of different tasks that we're trying to do. So if you're trying to do 2 things at once, well, then both of those things aren't necessarily getting the best version of you. But if you whittle that down to 1, like Raven is saying, then it you'll be surprised at how quickly getting it done happens. That's
Mhm.
even true for washing the dishes or something. You put some
Right.
music on and you zone out, you'll get it done in no time. So I think with the simple stuff and both the simple stuff and the complex stuff, the big goal stuff,
Mhm.
it's important to understand how to really break those things down and how to do it consistently, because big goals require consistent action. There's
Exactly.
no way around it.
No other way.
There's no silver bullet. So if you're watching this and you're looking for just like this overnight kind of thing, I don't know what to tell you. You probably tuned in the wrong program. Okay. So so, Raven, what does thought leadership mean to you? I always like to ask my guests this question, and I get a different answer every single time.
Mhm.
This show is called "Think Like a Thought Leader" for a reason. It's meant for people who are leaders or aspiring to be leaders. It's meant for them to understand all the things that need to be in place in both their professional and personal lives in order to excel. So, what does thought leadership mean to you?
I think good leaders are able to serve. And so when I think about a thought leader, I'm thinking about someone who's serving their audience in the most positive way, depending on whatever the topic may be. But it's not just about, when people think about leadership, they think about, oh, there's someone in charge or there's someone who's the expert. But what are you doing to serve? How are you truly helping the individuals who are following you? And so that's what thought leadership means to me. I always connect leadership with being able to serve.
Oh, I like that. Service
Yeah,
at the forefront.
right.
So, what thought leaders have positively impacted your journey? Who do you look to?
There's been plenty, too many to name. There's some that we know them by name, and then there's some that even in my own family where you think, okay, well, a thought leader has to be famous or they have to be a celebrity. And, my mom is someone that I really enjoy looking toward. I really enjoy how she operates. I think she's such a strong woman. I enjoy her perspective on things. And so I look at her as a leader in my personal life. I know for me, I've read all of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I
Oh,
think
I love Malcolm
yeah,
Gladwell.
I love him. The way he constructs the book is immaculate. I love it. I mean, it's awesome. And I just finished his latest book, Talking to Strangers. It was awesome as the other ones were. But just the way that you can take a subject matter and he takes a subject matter and makes you look at it in different ways and really breaks it down, connects it to history. So you have the historical aspect, you have the context of the world we're living in now, and then you have the story itself. And I absolutely love that. So if I had to pick one, I definitely look to Malcolm Gladwell and the way that he thinks about different subjects because they're important. They're extremely important.
Very much so. Now, I have to admit, I have not read his most recent book, Talking to Strangers, but my favorite one that I have read, that is on my list. My
Mhm.
favorite one is David and Goliath.
Yes.
Oh, I recommend that book to everyone I talk to
Yeah.
because I love how he basically turns the mythology, the story, the narrative around David and Goliath on its head.
Right.
And so I think that right now, people like Malcolm Gladwell are great to tune into because there's a lot of doom, there's a lot of gloom.
Yeah.
You turn on the news and it is depressing,
Mhm.
right? We have to stay informed at some point, but some of this stuff is just a lot, and I feel collectively some people feel like burdened down by
Right.
all of that. And so I think that books are a wonderful way to really shift one perspective, and Malcolm does a
Exactly.
beautiful job of that.
Yes, he does. Very much so.
So, what's next for you, Raven? I know that you have this book, The Seven Practices of Prosperous Women. Actually, let me make sure that I share this as well because you have a special gift for our viewers and listeners, right? So, you can grab Raven's latest book, The Seven Practices of Prosperous Women. You can grab a signed copy and save 30% if you go to Raven's website, Raven Magwood Is that right, Raven? And did I get it right?
Yes, ravenmagwood.com. Yes.
Okay. And I actually have to put in the promo code. It is leader7, using code leader7. I meant to put that in there.
Yes. So yeah,
At
definitely,
ravenmagwood.com.
definitely
Make
check it
sure you
out.
go grab that. Yes. Make sure you go grab that. Get a signed copy from Raven. You have heard it from her, straight from her mouth. Some of the practices that she has put to work to become a prosperous woman. And you don't necessarily have to be a woman to be prosperous. Okay. This conversation is both for men and women who identify, people who identify as both men and women. Now, Raven, what's next for you? What do you have working in the works right now?
Yes. Well, I have been using this time at home to get a lot of writing done and recording as well. So there will be an audiobook version of my book, The Seven Practices of Prosperous Women, narrated by me, coming out very soon, very soon. So we're working on that production. So I'm super, super excited about that. I kept getting the DMs from women saying, please make an audiobook. I would love to listen in my car. I would love to listen while I'm cleaning my house. And so once I got enough messages, I'm like, okay, let's use this time to sit here and record. So that's coming up. I've also been writing screenplays. You'll be able to see some movies that I'm writing on your screen soon. So I'm super, super excited about that. I have a success journal that will be available next week. And it really breaks down how I construct my days, and it allows you to do the same way. So we were talking about things I do every day, making the to-do list, being intentional about these 4 categories in your life. I give you a whole rundown in my success journal for 90 days where you do this for 90 days straight, and it allows you to get closer to achieving your long-term goals. So that's super cool, and I'm super excited about it. And yeah, just utilizing social media right now as we're social distancing to further impact people's lives. Been doing a lot of interviews, IG lives, posting interviews, and it's been great. I've been really enjoying interacting with fans from around the world, literally around the world, Australia, France, Africa, India. It's been awesome. So to know that I'm positively impacting people drives me to want to do more. And it's been super exciting.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the show, Raven, and to
Oh, yeah.
share your perspective around pivoting into your purpose. And if you're watching this, please, please, please go grab your signed copy of Raven's latest book, The 7 Practices of Prosperous Women. And you can save 30% off your purchase by using the code LEADER7. Go to ravenmagwood.com. Where else can people connect with you, Raven?
Oh, yeah. I'm most active on Instagram, and it's just my name at Raven Magwood. I'm also really active on Facebook too. Same thing, facebook.com/Raven Magwood. And if you send me a message, I will try my best to get back with you. I get a lot, but I do try to respond as well as I can. And yeah, I'm there online. Catch me on my interviews. Website is ravenmagwood.com.
Thank you so much. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed this conversation and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about it and know your number one. I'm sure Raven would like to know about it as well. So drop down in the comments if you're watching this and tell us what your aha moment was from this conversation. Or if you're listening to this on the podcast, take a screenshot of you listening, post it to your Instagram stories and tag me at the Courtney Bowden and tag Raven too at Raven Magwood so that we can both share it with the world. And if this spoke to your soul, go ahead and hit that share button or tag someone who needs to see or hear this episode in the comments. And if you want to hear more conversations and content like this, then I encourage you to go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and also on YouTube. And finally, if you have any questions, go ahead and email thinklikeathoughtleader@gmail.com. And I might even use your question for a future podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye.